IFRS Training is your IFRS training partner in Africa. Annually, we offer courses in more than 15 cities in Africa and abroad, covering a wide range of topics such as IFRS, IPSAS, and GRAP. Over 5,000 professionals benefit from these programs. Our trainers have years of industry experience, offering quality training solutions that are at pace with the dynamic changes in the corporate world. Our mission is to be the leader in IFRS consultancy and training in Africa. Our vision is to build human capability and capacity through organizational development solutions. We currently offer training in the following cities in Africa and abroad: Johannesburg, Cape Town, Dubai, Lusaka, Maseru, Gaborone, Windhoek, Harare, Lilongwe, Dar es Salaam, Kigali, Nairobi, Kampala, Kinshasa, and Port Louis. Our popular courses include IFRS Masterclass, IFRS Refresher and Updates, IFRS 6 Exploration for and Evaluation of Mineral Resources, IFRS for the oil and gas petrochemical sector, IFRS for banks, and a wide range of offerings for GRAP and IPSAS. Let us partner with you on your training journey. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all, depending on where in the world you are joining us from. And welcome to the second edition of the annual IFRS Africa Symposium 2022. It is a pleasure to have you here with us for the second edition of this symposium. We are very, very, very lucky to have joining us today on the program Dr. Iyad, Gerard Diaz, Anne Rosenberg, and Dr. Prince Sinamane. Please refer to your updated agendas for the times of each presentation. Without any further ado, we're going to get straight into Dr. Iyad's presentation. Before we begin, just a short introduction on who Dr. Iyad is and what he will be covering in today's presentation.
Greeting. My name is Iyad Abumoghli. I am the founder and director of the Faith for Earth initiative of the United Nations Environment Program. I'm the principal policy advisor on the role of religions in environmental governance. I have been working with the United Nations for more than 25 years and have held several positions. Previously, I was UNEP's representative for the Arab States region and West Asia. And before that, I worked with UNDP for more than 16 years in different countries and different positions, including as the Director of Innovation and Knowledge, Policy Advisor on Environmental Governance, and the Practice Manager of the Energy and Environment Group in New York. As I am currently focusing on the role of religions, I will be talking during the second annual IFRS Symposium on the value-based system in religions and on the environment, as well as on the Faith for Earth focus and the environment, social governance as part of the value creation and inclusive capitalism. Looking forward to meeting you all. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you very much for the introduction. I am really honored and pleased to be with you here today on the second symposium of IFRS in Africa. I will be sharing with you some thoughts on inclusive capitalism, why we are doing the work we are doing currently from the United Nations Environment Program, and what are our focuses in the current period and moving forward. As mentioned, I am the founder and director of the Faith for Earth initiative and working with the United Nations Environment Program. Now, let me first start by introducing UNEP. Some people might not know what we do and what is our focus. United Nations Environment Program is, of course, a member of the UN system. It's a UN organization and has the mandate to focus on the environmental component of the Sustainable Development Goals. And mainly, we work on policy-related matters. Of course, we are a science-based organization providing leadership on environmental issues within the UN system, and we do advocacy on environmental issues, current and future ones. So we set the global environmental agenda in consultation with member states, and we focus and select the priorities that the international community should focus on in the periods to come every 4 years or so. As a science-based organization, of course, policies need to be relevant and to be scientifically evidenced. That means we collect data, information. We have a UN environment situation room where we store the data. We collect the data from member states and from other international organizations. We analyze them. We see the trends happening across the globe on environmental issues, and we monitor the implementation of environmental actions. And as well, we predict and measure and assess what are the trending and what are the emerging environmental threats. So before they start affecting or having an impact on the global community, we highlight those emerging environmental issues, and we start collecting the scientific evidence to contribute to environmental sustainability at the global level. Now, we are governed by an assembly called the United Nations Environment Assembly. It is similar to the General Assembly of the UN, however, focusing on environmental issues. And it meets every 2 years. It is composed of 193 member states, which is the global General Assembly members. And this year it met in its fifth session. However, before being an assembly, we used to have a governing council since 1972. So the fifth session of the new sort of membership. And it discussed a number of global resolutions and decisions, and we adopted 15 resolutions that are global in nature that were passed by the General Assembly of the UN. And one of the landmark resolutions that we adopted this year was a resolution on plastics and trying to come up with an international treaty on the plastics and its impact at the global level, and what the member states and of course everybody else should do in terms of reducing the plastic pollution. Now, our major agenda is Agenda 2030 that was adopted in 2015 and started the implementation in 2016. And part of that came the Sustainable Development Goals as goals and objectives and indicators for the implementation of this global agenda. Now, I'm not sure if you can see, I can't see it myself, but the 5 important principles concerned with the Agenda 2030 are the people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. That means we are putting the Sustainable Development Goals to serve the people to live in a healthy planet and enjoy prosperity, doing that in peace and in partnership. And those principles do apply to what you businesses call the ESG, the environment, social, and governance aspect of businesses, where the planet, profit, and people are the focus, and the integration of these 3 pillars working together will give us the ESG, or the environment, social, and good governance in businesses. Now, for businesses, it is important that we mention we have been through many industrial revolutions. Of course, the invention of carbon-based industry 200 years ago was a key in development. And then we started talking about mass production and the foundation or innovation of electricity that provided easy access to energy resources and so on. And then, of course, the internet and the cyber physical systems to include the Internet of Things, the artificial intelligence, and so on. And all of these industrial revolutions were very important for the development and advancement of people. However, we discovered that doing so was on the expense of the environment, as everybody knows. And now we are witnessing the impacts of climate change because of our consumption and production patterns, because of the mining extractive industry that is impacting the natural resources to limits that are beyond the generative capacity of the planet. So we need to do and work with these industrial revolutions in an ethical way that is inclusive, that is transparent, that is transformative, and results in good impacts on for the people and on the planet. So the Sustainable Development Goals and the Agenda 2030 agenda is important in terms of integrating the socio-economic and environmental pillars. However, there is a 4th pillar, which is very important, which is the cultural pillar that was included in when we started talking about Agenda 21 in the year 2000 and the essence of the meaning of sustainable development. However, it was integrated into all the Sustainable Development Goals, but lost its priority and its central factor in driving an inclusive, sustainable development. Therefore, we looked at the spectrum of stakeholders, because the Sustainable Development Goals cannot be achieved by one member state or by two member states or by all member states without the inclusion of stakeholders as part of the implementation mechanism of the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, what is the cultural component? It is not only religions, as I am showing here, but religions are main stakeholders, the followers, the adherent, the businesses that are based on religious values, the institutions that are inspired by religions. Now, if you look at this chart, it shows how many people believe in any religion. So 2.2 billion people believe in Christianity, 1.9 billion people believe in Islam, and so on. So a research was done by Pew Research Center, found that around 85% of people, they associate themselves to a religion. So when you ask somebody, or when you ask 10 people, 8 of them, they would say, yes, we believe in a religion, and the religion drives our behaviors on a daily basis. So here we have seen that the importance of including this, forgotten power of religions in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, and as a key sector of the society for the implementation of the SDGs. So we came up with the Faith for Earth initiative, and the initiative has 3 main goals. The first goal is the inclusion of the faith players or faith actors or faith institutions and faith leaders in the policy making. As I mentioned, we are governed by the United Nations Environment Assembly, and the Assembly adopts global resolutions. And previously, we never had representatives of the faith community impacting, debating, having dialogues on policy issues. After the establishment of the Faith for Earth initiative, when we started, we had 1 or 2 faith institutions as members of the stakeholders. Currently, we have more than 60 faith-based organizations as members of the stakeholders community, contributing to the discussions, review of policies, and impacting the policy making system. The second goal of the initiative is, and this is very much related to businesses and to private sector. The faith organizations are economically powerful organizations, and I will talk about that in a minute. And they own assets and they own investments measured in billions and billions of dollars. While the faith-based organizations do contribute to infrastructure development, to improving the livelihood of the people, however, those investments are not green. So working with faith-based investment institutions, we are trying to green those assets and investments. And the third goal is related to bringing the scientific evidence with the faith values and teachings, and bridging the common understanding between the scientists and the faith actors. For example, there is a scientific evidence that climate change is happening and is impacting the planet and the people. And also religions do address climate change in different ways. So we are trying to bring those 2 understandings to the understanding of the followers of faith, and especially faith leaders who would take this to their followers and make it as an important value system in their doings and practices on a daily basis. And all of that is supported by a knowledge management system at the United Nations. Last year, the United Nations Environment Assembly adopted a new midterm strategy that started this year, and it will last for 2025 for 4 years. Now, this is the structure that was adopted by 193 member states, focusing on 3 planetary issues: climate change, nature degradation, and chemical and pollution, including waste pollution. So the international community will be focusing on those 3 thematic areas, supported by what we call the foundational and enabling programs. And those include the science policy interface, environmental governance, finance and economic transformation, and the digital transformation. Now, we have mapped what faith organizations can and how they can contribute to achieving those goals and contributing to achieving these strategy objectives. So instead of only of saying what the science says about these issues, we also now can say what religions and sacred scripts say about those issues and how they are being handled or addressed by religious institutions. We facilitate the contribution of faith-based organizations to the international or intergovernmental bodies like COP26, COP27 of climate change, COP15 on biodiversity, and so on, and on the different intergovernmental bodies. And by the way, UNEP manages 13 intergovernmental bodies on different environmental issues like the Basel, Rotterdam, like the conventions on oceans and so on, biodiversity. All of those are managed by UNEP with, of course, autonomous secretariats of these conventions. Now, we have started the establishment of the Faith for Earth Coalition. Instead of being an initiative housed by UNEP, we are working on establishing this global coalition. And the coalition is composed of 5 important councils. The first council is the Council of Eminent Faith Leaders. You know, the leadership of Pope Francis, the leadership of Imam al-Azhar, the leadership of the highest Buddhist, the highest Hindu, and so on. So although they meet sporadically every 2 or 3 years, and they focus on the different important global issues, however, there's no mechanism that brings them together on ecological and environmental issues. So the Council of Eminent Faith Leaders within the Faith for Earth Coalition will bring that systemic approach to bringing those high-level people to contribute to environmental sustainability. One important area where they contributed is on the launch of the Decade of Ecosystem Restoration that started last year, and both Imam al-Azhar and Pope Francis held or contributed to the launch of the decade. The second council is the Council of Young Faith Leaders, the Youth Council. And we know the role of young people is mushrooming, is having important impact. There are so many initiatives and movements led by young people. The enthusiasm, the innovation approaches of young people is very important to capture. And especially if we add the value system to their work. So the young faith leaders will be adding that component. The presence of the Youth Council alongside the Council of Eminent Faith Leaders will ensure the intergenerational aspect of dialogue and understanding. So this is important to be part of a same coalition. The third council is the network of CEOs of faith-based organizations. As I mentioned, faith-based organizations have been contributing to development of communities to countries, even they rule countries in some cases, and so on. So their work on including the sustainable development component into their businesses is very important. The fourth council is the Faith Science Consortium. As I mentioned, there is huge understanding and misunderstanding between religions and sciences. So we are trying to bring them together to provide not only the scientific evidence, but also the moral and spiritual responsibility and moral responsibility into the work on environmental governance. And the fifth council is the Council of Women Faith Leaders. We know the contributions of women is very important in the development arena, but also bringing women faith leaders will ensure the integration of gender aspects into the work of religious institutions. So what are the powers of religious actors and why we are focusing on integrating religions into our work? The first power, what I call the convening and convincing powers. You know, sometimes when you try to convince somebody with an argument, you bring a scientific evidence, and that can bring along people to agree on the principles that you are discussing. But others, as happening on climate change, would debate that there is no enough scientific data or information or evidence that climate change is happening or that it is impacting the global. But when you bring in a faith leaders and this faith leader tells you from a scripture that they believe in, those who follow that religion would agree without debating, because this is their spiritual belief. So it is important to convince people from their background beliefs and religious understanding and attitudes. The convening, with a call of prayer, you can gather thousands and thousands of people. So they have the power of convening people together in informing them about their principles. And I also mentioned they're outspread, where they exist in almost every corner of the world. There are more than 40 million churches and more than 4 million mosques and thousands and thousands and millions of temples around the world. So there is a faith leaders everywhere you go. So their network is unmatched network, and even the UN system with all its organizations cannot match this network of religious leaders. The second power is the economic power of religions. You know, it is surprising to all of us that faith institutions own more than 8% of habitable land on earth. You know how much is that? It is 2,700 times the size of Singapore. It is 24 times the size of the United Kingdom. All of that is owned by faith institutions. So they do contribute to climate change. They do impact working on climate change. They do impact ecosystems degradation, and they do conserve ecosystems. They own more than 50% of schools, around 50% of hospitals at the global level. So their economic power is important to be addressed, and in terms of sustainability. What we're saying is that technology is very important, innovation is very important, policy is very important, but technology and policy alone cannot solve all the pressing environmental issues. So what we need is a transformational system that builds on the behavioral and environmental ethical changes in whatever we do in terms of businesses, in terms of consumption and production. So the cultural and religious component are very important to be introduced to change the mindset of the people when they consume and when they produce. So the values and ethics are very important. So let's see, what do they mean? There are two systems, while they have so much in common, the religious ethical values and the secular ethical values. Of course, the religious values are built and extracted and practiced for thousands of years. And those are, in the scripture of and practices of religious leaders and religions. While the secular ethics are those that are internationally adopted. Certainly, they came from the basis of religions, but they were developed based on the international system and approval of values. The primary difference between those two systems are how do you justify those values. We justify it from a religious perspective, that you have a moral responsibility, but you justify it from a secular point of view, that you are a good citizen, you are an international citizen, that you contribute to the global system, so that you have a moral obligation to the international system. The essence of including the values and ethical systems is to come up with systems that are beneficial for the people and, of course, for the planet. Now, what are the spiritual values that are related to the environment? These set of norms, of values, of principles come from the diversity of religions. And while there are different values in different religions, they all meet in the moral responsibility of followers or adherent to that religion towards the environment. Now, some of these values can be easily connected to everything that is around us, from the challenges, the environmental challenges that we are facing. For example, when you think about ahimsa, which is a Buddhist or Hindu concept of non-violence. Now, non-violence is against, one another, but also it is non-violence against nature. You cannot cut a tree, you cannot pollute a river, you cannot destroy an ecosystem, and so on. For example, the walk gently on earth, which is adopted by all religions. It is the sustainable lifestyle system of, not contributing to the degradation of ecosystems and the exhaustion of natural resources. So these, in general, are some of the values, and we are mapping all of the environmental issues that are being discussed today with the faith, values, and ethics that are governing the practices of people. This year, as I mentioned, we had the UN Environment Assembly, and alongside we had 2 weeks of Faith for Earth policy dialogue, including more than 700 participants, where more than 57 religions and congregations have participated. We had 180 speakers, and representing more than 85 countries, who have debated the resolutions that were discussed at the UN Environment Assembly. And they brought in the moral and principles for the policy dialogue, and moral principles for our obligations towards the environment. These discussions ensures that we are speaking about intergenerational aspects. So the current generation, what we are doing currently, but our responsibility to the future generations. So we cannot forget that we are leaving this earth to future generations, and they need to enjoy the same ability to access the resources of earth without being destroyed. It is multilateral. Multilateralism is our only option to address these complex environmental issues of climate change, nature, and pollution, and they need all hands on deck. So everybody should be included, including the faith organizations and faith actors, as well as private sector, businesses, civil society, and so on. So introducing the gender aspects of the moral responsibility and having the dialogue with the diversity of religions. To support our arguments on the role of values and moral responsibility, we have published a number of important publications on the role of ethics and values in environmental governance, and these are links to these publications talking about the role of faith values in environmental governance, in ecosystem restoration, in the new human environment relationship, the new development paradigm that everybody is talking about. Now, why do we need value systems in doing businesses? Of course, the sustainability aspect is very important. We need to ensure that the businesses contribute to sustainability. We need trustworthy businesses that can contribute to the benefits of the people and the planet while generating profit, because this is a legitimate business and legitimate aspiration of people, and include the morality of businesses in leading, a profitable system for the planet and the people. So the green economy system that UNEP leads with member states, with stakeholders, and so on, we are trying to translate that into the work of businesses related to religions that I mentioned. They have a huge economic power. So we have been leading some work on divestment, on greening assets, on financial responsibility of investment corporations of religious institutions. Now, what is impact investment? You have two types or different types of businesses and organizations. Organizations that are dedicated merely to support people, support the planet, and support a better socio-economic system by giving. So they only give to the planet and the people. And there are the extreme businesses that are only profitable. They only want to increase, enhance, maximize their profits regardless of their impact on the people and the planet. But also there are institutions that are in the middle, where they integrate the responsibility towards the people, the planet, the stakeholders, and the employees and the people in general, and their impacts or their profit-making system that generates income again to the people and to benefit the planet. So this is a huge spectrum. And for organizations or businesses, they usually do what we call portfolio screening. So when you want to invest in a system, you either do find that this is positively contributing to the people and the environment, or negatively doing so. So the positive screening is the positive contributions to the society, good governance, internal staffing system, strong environmental practices. While the negative screening is to investigate what the products and businesses are contributing, how harmful they are to people and the environment. So some examples of the ESG, which I believe many of you is using as a system of screening on environmental, social, and governance aspects. Some of the environmental issues relate to climate change, relate to water pollution, relate to energy efficiency, water scarcity, because so many countries do not have access to clean water. And they touch upon the social issues like the gender diversity, human rights, the satisfaction of customs, and so on, but also on governance issues related to their contributions to the political discussions, the compensation system, corruption, auditing, and so on. So this is the system of ESG that is related to businesses. As I mentioned, we have been working on including faith investment institutions, and we have contributed to developing a number of publications such as Faith in Finance, such as From Faith to Consistent Investing, and a number of global dialogue that we have held with dozens and dozens of businesses discussing their moral responsibility. Last year, there was a research done by 360 organization, and they found that there is a movement that already have started in divesting from oil and gas industries. And the value of this divestment amounted to $11 trillion. And some of these organizations were faith-based organizations representing 20% of that divestment movement. But also there are governments, there are for-profit corporation businesses, and so on. But however, when you divest, you need to reinvest. So the challenge now is, what are the profitable businesses that when you divest from oil and gas, what gives you a high level of profit, not only as a cash profit or income, but also a profit to the people and the planet. UNEP, of course, is engaging on the financial systems, and we have a number of initiatives leading moral and responsible investment, like the finance initiative of UNEP, like the inquiry into the design of sustainable financial systems, like the network with financial centers, and the inclusive green economy hub. All of these relate to greening investments and bringing in sustainable investment practices. For example, UNEP Finance Initiative is a global entity that existing since 1992, has come up with important principles, and is now we have a membership of 450 banks as members of this system, which provides principles for responsible banking, principles for sustainable insurance, and principles for responsible investment. It is free to join the UNEP Finance Initiative for businesses, but as I mentioned, it's focusing on the financing institutions to be members of that system. Now, it is important to consider when we discuss businesses and profits and contributions to the people and the planet, to consider the natural capital accounting. Of course, as business leaders, you do your financial accounting, how much we are getting, how much we're spending, how much the raw materials are, how much we pay salaries, and so on. But rarely businesses do natural capital accounting, where you do have, along all of these accounting systems, an accounting of how much we are contributing to extracting resources, not the value of how much you pay to buy that extractive, but also what is the natural value for that extractive. For example, when you pay water bills, you pay the amount that is imposed by the government, the county, whatever, but it does not account for the actual cost of water degradation, water pollution, water extraction, the cost of non-availability, scarcity of water resources on the people and on nature, and so on. So these are very important accounting systems that responsible businesses need to include. As I mentioned, the Sustainable Development Goals, the overarching principles, and the targets of the Sustainable Development Goals do relate to responsible businesses and adding a value system to these businesses. For example, if we take only SDG 12 related to sustainable consumption and production, and SDG 13 related to climate change, we see that there is a role for businesses to contribute to driving inclusive capital market systems through decisions based on longer term practices and longer term impacts on the people and the planet, or embedding sustainable development into the strategy and operation of any business, or encouraging the consistency and accessibility to climate-related disclosure and reporting. So businesses do contribute directly to the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, reaching to the overarching better future for the people and the planet. Now, we talked about values and systems in changing the behavior of the people from a faith perspective. Now, there is also an institutional behavioral change potential for systems that we are working with. For example, you might have heard of Laudato Si, which is an encyclical letter published by Pope Francis, the Catholic Church, that talks about the responsibility of Christians towards the call of the poor and the call of the planet, where it's adopting what is called the integral ecology, that provides for the people, the planet, the different races, different genders, and so on. Similarly, we have been working with Muslim, the 2.2 billion Muslims, through their scholars and institutions, to come up with a similar Islamic covenant for the earth called Al-Mizan, which hopefully will be launched in the next couple of months. We're also tomorrow we have a global congress for Hindus, and we're going to propose the establishment of a similar covenant for Hindus to drive the behavior of all people of the world. So if we address Muslims, Christians, and Hindus, we are addressing almost 80% of the people. But as I mentioned, the development paradigm that we have been adopting and driving development has been a brown paradigm, contributing to the destruction of the environment and leading to inequalities between people. So we need a new development paradigm. And probably you've heard of the Stockholm Declaration that was issued in 1972, which defined the relationship between humans and the environment. And this year we held 50 years anniversary of Stockholm Plus 50. Although the relationship between human and the environment in 1972 improved the environmental governance system, however, the challenges that have been arising since 1972 have been too much to handle and have created new types of problems and so on. However, if we look at it from a value system, we need to work on, in addition to the Stockholm Plus 50 principles of regeneration, recovery, rebalance, renewal, and reimagination, we need to include reconciliation between man and the creation as a moral responsibility, recognition of the moral values in shaping the production systems and consumption patterns, and rediscovering the moral and spiritual roots of humanity and human rights in relation to nature, and resetting the human mindset of superiority over the resources that are available on the planet. Now, that leads us to a system, a new paradigm of inclusive capitalism. Capitalism is important. We need to generate resources, financial and capital investments. We need to improve the development of the people, but we need to do that sustainably, and we need to do that in an inclusive manner. So what is inclusive capitalism? Inclusive capitalism is creating a long-term value that benefits the people from all backgrounds, all businesses, all investors, but also benefits the planet, does not destroy the planet's resources. Inclusive capitalism is inclusive when it generates sustainable growth that addresses the needs of the society and the needs of the planet. It is done in a responsible manner, in an economic system that employs responsible systems, like I mentioned, the responsible financing, investment, and banking, and so on. It has to leave no one behind, the same basic principle of the Sustainable Development Goals. So leaving no one behind. And not only generate near-term gains, but also long-term gains for the generations to come. So this is the intergenerational aspects of inclusivity. Now, as I mentioned, Pope Francis in 1995 launched Laudato Si. And Laudato Si, as I mentioned, it is a principle for inclusive and integral ecology. And it touches upon the needs of the people and the poor and the planet. And Pope Francis also called for a new development economic paradigm that is felt not only at the societal level, but also at the individual level, and the responsibility of not only societies and businesses, but also individual responsibilities. So from the perspective of Laudato Si, inclusive capitalism, again, is a system that leaves no one behind, that has no borders between men and women, between societies, between different religions, different backgrounds, but also that includes benefits for the current generation and the next generation. UNEP, through the Faith for Earth initiative, we have also launched the call for climate responsible financing, a moral imperative, and we focused this initiative on the impact of children and young people, because they are part of the marginalized societies, or part of the society that they are more impacted by climate change, environmental degradation than any other part of the sector, including women and girls. And that was done with the World Council of Churches, the Council of Elders of Muslims, and the Board of Rabbis of New York. So it's a comprehensive multi-religious initiative to reach to an inclusive capitalism with a responsible financing system. We have been glad that we have been working with the Council of Inclusive Capitalism, and we became members as allies to this council. Now, the council brings the private and public sectors together in considering an inclusive capitalism reforms and employs best practices. And the main principles are to create opportunities for systemic changes. As I mentioned, it has to be institutional, otherwise it will not be sustainable. And catalyze the good practices of companies that are being practiced. Of course, there are businesses that are green, that are contributing to better benefits for the people and the planet. And use a system of tools that can ensure sharing of growth on a sustainable manner. And of course, the last principle is committing leaders to impact change for the people and for the planet. So there are two types of membership of the council. Stewards. Stewards are leaders or CEOs of businesses who commit tangible, measurable practices and policies in their businesses to make a systemic change. Allies are organizations that contribute to achieving the same goals of inclusive capitalism, like the UNEP Faith for Earth initiative. We work towards the same goal. Currently, there are more than 330 CEOs, members of the Council of Inclusive Capitalism, with more than 630 commitments, concrete shared principles in their own businesses. Cutting across many aspects of industries and of course environmental issues in 126 countries. Some of the examples, for example, the Reliance Industries have committed to achieve a carbon zero carbon by 2035. The Bank of America, for example, committed to a 5-year plan to hire more than 10,000 individuals from neighborhoods to increase income of those localities. Another 2 examples from Africa, for example, the African Development Bank has committed to at least 40% of its annual investment to go towards climate financing and invest $3 billion in financing women-owned businesses. The Bizoli Transport and Logistics have committed to employ 1 million women in the transport sector by 2025. So these are measurable commitments and indicators that have been adopted by leading organizations or businesses. The systemic or scaling of the change in the private sector, as I mentioned, cuts across the people, prosperity, planet, and partnership. And those also cut across the principles of ESG. For the people, it is related to dignity and equality, related to health and well-being. For the planet, it addresses climate change, nature degradation, water pollution. For the prosperity of the people, the wealth of the people, of the community and society, and of course employing the principles of good governance and good governing systems, including ethical behavior and value for their businesses. These are members of the CEOs or members of the Council of Inclusive Capitalism. You will find very prominent CEOs. I'm not going to mention names, but they cut across very important global businesses. As I mentioned, one example is the African Development Bank CEO, the others, founders and CEOs of global institutions and businesses that are contributing to the global economic prosperity. The Council of Inclusive Capitalism is also launching a just energy transition initiative and system where it is developing a system that provides a transformation to an energy system that is sustainable, that produces net zero emissions, and that takes into account social and economic impacts and benefits to people and to the planet. It's a multi-sectoral approach. It touches not only on the energy, but also on water resources, on pollution, on societies, on long-term contributions to, for example, in Africa, more than 800 million people do not have access to sustainable energy. So this initiative contributes to addressing that issue. The just transition adopts important factors or elements or pillars. The first one is universality in the application of net zero energy, the evolution of workforce, providing employment opportunities, investment opportunities for the societies, for individuals, creating new type of skills that are needed, training and so on. Community resilience, adopting to adaptation to climate change through the just transition to sustainable energy, and of course adopting collaboration and transparency in its operations. So these are the core practices, and of course the specific practices related to those include creating new jobs and redeploying workers and providing local supply chains for the energy systems that are lacking at the global level. I hope I have not had more time that I was supposed to, and we are very happy that we have this opportunity to share with you some of our practices and thoughts on inclusive capitalism, and I will be very happy to take questions from the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Iyad, for that engaging session on how capitalism can be more inclusive for everyone. We're now going to head into a Q&A session. If there are any questions from the audience, you can begin to send those in. I see that some have come in, and we will have Gerard Diaz moderating this Q&A session. Yes?
Yeah, thank you, Bonita, for inviting me to take up the question. First of all, Dr. Iyad, it's a great pleasure to see you again. We met virtually last year, October 1 particular event in CS Sri Lanka. There you have addressed our gathering, the accountants, like from a different perspective, but which really matters to the professionals like us, like who are main into accounting and auditing and related. So thank you once again for this great, insightful presentation. Overall, I think if we relate what you have shared, you have given the bigger picture of creating value for everyone. So we are pieces of that whole journey. But as you said, maybe a small piece, but together we can. So having said that, Doctor, if I may take last 2-3 years, first we had this devastating pandemic stemming from China 2019 December, and it went for some 2 years, and still when some are sort of settling down, but certain countries still struggling because of the post-COVID-19 impact. On top of that, we can hear in different countries, especially the developed countries even, that inflation has gone up. So even for the essentials, they are struggling. And certain developing countries like Zimbabwe, Lebanon, Sri Lanka, in my country, we are going through a serious credit crisis. And we can see from somewhere else, like all of a sudden this Russia-Ukraine war came into play, having another sort of element of, it's all happening in the earth, but better place to everyone in earth. So how we see these challenges for this whole journey for good for everyone? How you see these challenges? Yeah.
Well, Jared, it's truly devastating to when you put the entire picture in front of you. We have been witnessing unprecedented environmental challenges. Climate change is happening. Ecosystem destruction is happening. We are at the risk of the extinction of 1 million species. Pollution is happening everywhere. Rivers are being polluted. Even sacred rivers, if you go to India, rivers that are being, worshipped or used as sacred places, they are polluted by industries, by development, and so on. In addition, we faced 2 years now, almost 3 years of COVID-19, which has taken us back in terms of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. We were in some goals we're progressing well. reducing poverty, improving health of the people, and so on. But when COVID hit, it retracted us, many steps, and we are doubtful that by 2030 we will be achieving most of the SDGs. So this is a global challenge. Now, you mentioned also wars, and there are 45 active disputes at the global level. Not only Russia and Ukraine are on CNN and Al Jazeera, but there are 45 other disputes that are not being mentioned, in the Middle East, in Latin America, in Southeast Asia, and so on. All of that is a complicated system, and it requires an unconventional multilateralism to be able to solve them. So we cannot, and of course we need to employ an integrated approach for doing that. And this is the essence of the Sustainable Development Goals, the integration. You cannot work on poverty without addressing prosperity. We can't work on prosperity without addressing planetary issues, water resources, climate change, and so on. So they are all interrelated. You cannot achieve one of the goals without working on the other goals. So the multilateral system is our last resort. We have to come again under the umbrella of the United Nations, maybe a reformed United Nations system that is equal and that provides for everybody to be included and to be an inclusive system in addressing these issues. We know the devastating impact of conflicts on environmental issues. Environment is the unseen, invisible victim of wars. Yes, you do have people who lose their lives, people who are injured, but those you can count and you can, relate to, and you can feel with, and you can work on, compensations and so on. But when the environment is impacted, that is a lost, battle against nature. And our Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that we are waging wars against the planet because of our behaviors and so on. So we need inclusivity, we need multilateral system, we need to put all people in the driving seat. Businesses are very important for the prosperity of the people and for reducing poverty, but also they are important in addressing these environmental challenges. So it is the role of everybody, even individuals. When you have the principles of ethical behavior integrated into your daily practices, you become a positive contributor to improving the situation, whether you uphold peace-building principles or you uphold, the principles of moral responsibility towards water pollution. All these principles are important. We are, even policymakers are individuals. So, integrating those principles into individual behaviors will lead eventually to adopting ethical policies that applies and cuts across all these global challenges that we are facing.
Yes, I think we got what you're trying to say. It's all about the collective effort, but everyone should stand up for the good. Doctor, like this is a kind of question which I really feel I really want to ask, but I will combine with one of the question raised by one of the participants. So when I was doing this kind of high levels review of the study about sustainable development goals, I think this sort of matter was initiated somewhere 1992 with this Sustainable Development Conference, where I think this came into effect somewhere 2012. so some 10 years ago, and it's that talks about creating value for everyone. And on top of that, last 2-3 years, the buzzword that we have seen everywhere is ESG. So that again, ESG is about value creation. But when we are listening to your speech and the efforts that professionals like UN has taken over the past with certain other institutions and the religious institutions, all efforts are for value creation, focusing on profit, planet, and sort of people. So is there any relevance that we need to worry about ESG, or to bring kind of a concept called ESG where the value creation is already there with SDGs? That's my first question. And the second is, do we really need to look at two sets of SDGs for developing countries and developed countries? Is that a kind of a necessity?
The second question is, do we
whether there should be a separation of SDGs for developed countries and developing countries?
Very good questions. The first one, I believe I have mentioned it in my presentation on how ESGs are linked to sustainable development goals. You know, ESGs relate to the environment, relate to society. Environment is the planet, society is the people, and governance is the implementation of the system of sustainable development goals, cutting across all areas, whether it is women empowerment, whether it is poverty elimination, or it's planetary issues. So they are very much integrated. Now, the important component is the adoption of the SDGs by businesses and by the private sector. And we have been seeing at the global system with, industries, with investments, even countries like Denmark, for example, included the sustainable investment into their constitution. And, that is related to even institutionalizing ESG or sustainable development into the constitution of countries. Tunisia, for example, they have adopted the SDGs as part of their constitution. So it became institutional thing rather than, voluntary contribution. So this is the first part. It is a movement that has started. It is, now we are 7 years into the SDGs. We still have 8 years to go. Now there's a bleak and black picture that we are seeing because of COVID, because of the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war and so on. But things can turn over. Things can take a different direction if we all come together. If we all believe that we need to be inclusive and we need to work together, if we all adopt this individually, societally, businesses and so on, so we can change and turn things around. Now, the question related to two different sets of the SDGs. This could be a killing factor for the SDGs and could redirect it from being an inclusive system towards a system that, you're a polluter, you pay, we are the victims, we receive. What we say is that this is a system that applies to all. And the principles of the system is that, it is shared responsibilities, but different prospects and different contributions. So it applies to Europe and the US as much as it applies to Tanzania, Sri Lanka, Jordan, and other countries. However, your contribution to the implementation of the SDG is, as in the climate change, there is mitigation and there is adaptation. Mitigation is reducing the initial root causes of climate change, which is adopting sustainable energy, for example, by all countries, but specifically investment by developed countries. And adaptation is helping developing countries to adapt to the new realities of what is happening. We cannot stop climate change. Climate change is happening, will continue to be with us. So we have to adapt to systems. And there is a responsibility of financing. This is an important aspect of all intergovernmental negotiations. Financing for sustainable development, financing for climate change or just climate transition, and so on. And the financing needs to come from developed countries who have the resources or who can contribute to bridging the gap between developed and developing countries.
Yeah, very clear, Doctor. So I think you have kind of mentioned about like what sort of a responsibility they are for the finance professional in a from a broad perspective. But to be very helpful to the audience, I think the majority who are listening today are coming from finance professions or the related. So what is like responsibility, like people like me and like the rest of the accountants, CFOs and CEOs? What we need to do to go there?
Yes, this is very important, and indeed, this is something that we have been working on since 1992. And I mentioned responsible banking, responsible financing, responsible investment. And these are principles of adopting the principles of green economy and the principles of green investment and green financing. Now, what we need to know that, of course, investment is necessary at any level, at the societal or global level. And investment institutions need to generate profits, because this is the nature of things. You have to make a profit to be able to contribute to the economy. But the profit making needs to be inclusive, needs to account for the natural capital, as I mentioned, account for the planetary boundary systems. You cannot keep extracting. For example, now there's an emerging issue of sand extraction. Sand is abundance at the surface of the earth, but the extraction of sand is changing ecosystems and is changing the face of the earth and the soil productivity and so on. So there are limits. Now there are investments in deep sea mining. When you go and you start mining natural resources from the oceans, again, we finished up with the surface of the earth. Now we're going deep to the sea for extraction, and we're changing ecosystems, and ecosystems are all related. So whatever happens in the oceans impacts whatever happens on land. So financing institutions need to integrate that into their systemic design of investment opportunities. When they're an investor, requesting to invest in an industry, it has to have investment principles, whether this investment is leading to profits for the people, profits for the planet, inclusive societies, leading to peace building. So these are the principles that we need to integrate into our financing system, and accountability measures and monitoring of these systems. One important aspect of the SDG is the monitoring system of how we are contributing to the SDGs. And I saw somebody mention the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals. And let me here relate your question to that. When we adopted the MDGs, 7 Millennium Development Goals, environment was a side factor, and the focus was on increasing the growth of communities. And it is known without any doubt that some countries that have been seeing societal, unhappiness, or it has not been inclusive, like Tunisia, for example, the revolution in Tunisia, revolution in Egypt. Those two countries were doing very well in terms of GDP, in terms of increasing, the gross national product, but on the expense of the environment and on the expense of the equality and the distribution of the wealth to the people. So it was not inclusive. It was exclusive in terms of, generating more income to the country itself or to the governing body, but not, it was the inclusive in terms of reaching out to the people in need. So it is a comprehensive system of principles that needs to be adopted. And I invite everybody to visit those links and learn more about these financial principles in banking and investment.
Doctor, there's one more question. I think I like to take it for bringing clarity to the participants or to maybe clear the gaps. So, Doctor, when it's come to financial statements preparation, the auditors are in place and there are a set of accounting standards which are applicable for even private and public in a different uniform way, where public sector might have separate set of accounting standards and the private sector another, or at the end of the day, there's a kind of uniformity. But when it's come to environmental matters, we haven't seen kind of a accounting standards or set of standards are in place, which is all about the people judgment and the best practices. So how these faith organization or religious institutions bring this accountability for environment where we have seen limited set of standards in place?
Yeah, this is a very excellent question, and this is why we are working with the faith-based institutions, with our investment institutions or organizations leading the principles of the religions. As I mentioned, their role is can be summarized in bringing the value of things to the people, whether it is individuals or whether it is systems and companies. Again, as I mentioned, the role of ethics, religious understandings and values into environmental governance, which is the G component of ESG, is very important. So we have started seeing, for example, during COP26, 42 faith leaders representing all known religions came together at the Vatican, where we all met, and we issued an interfaith statement of principles of how inclusive capitalism should be, how financial or financing systems should be. The faith leaders called upon member states, businesses, and need to be committed to these principles, but also they committed themselves to taking measures in their own faith institutions, like greening their assets, like adopting sustainable energy practices in worship places, like introducing sustainable development principles and environmental justice in education system. I mentioned 50% of the schools and universities are owned by faith organizations, so they are taking these measures. Now the challenge that you are posing, that I have been discussing with them, is monitoring. How do you monitor? How do you measure these commitments, whether we are meeting them or not meeting them? So we are creating this global coalition for establishing that monitoring system. So this religion has committed to divestment. Have they already divested? How much have they divested? And where have they reinvested? Because divestment needs to be met with reinvestment in a green industry somewhere else. So the monitoring system, while we do have the indicators for the SDGs, there are 202 indicators for the SDGs, that also needs to apply to the value creation system that we are talking about.
Right. Thanks, Dr. Iyad. My one last question, but rather being a question to give some more information to the audience from you. Like, I have seen this recent initiative, Council for Inclusive Capitalism. If anyone interested, like how they can join for this particular initiative or this valuable project.
Yes, it is open to all businesses. What you need to consider is whether you want to be a member of the council with tangible commitments, or you want to be an ally, aligning your objectives to the objectives of inclusive capitalism. So it is open for everybody, especially actually from Africa, where we need more massive engagement of CEOs, of businesses. The only thing is the commitment part. If you are really committed to serving the principles of inclusive capitalism, it's open. Everybody is welcome, and I think the links to the application system can be found on the web. It has a simple access. You just apply online. It's an online platform, easy to access. You provide your objectives and so on, and then the board of directors of CEOs will review that, and of course will communicate with the businesses. Even if you doubt that you have the same principles, please do apply. Please do approach them, because then there is a building capacity component where they can work with you on moving into being a member of the inclusive capitalism movement.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I think overall the message is clear. To make this earth a better place for everyone, I think we all need to act together. The concept sustainability development goals may be very broader, but in my organization, how I contribute to achieve those goals, that's where the things will start. Basically as a person, if I start doing something, I think when everyone does it, it will go to the society, corporate, and the country and the world. That's how I think we need to work on. I know that religious institution will play a bigger role, but it's not, we are just waiting until they come and push you, but we need to push ourselves, see a better world for our next generations to come. Thank you once again, Dr. Iyad, for having time with us. We'll see you again in another wonderful session or a conference.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for listening to me. And I hope I have been smooth and not hard on you. And I look forward to working with you again, discussing other important issues. Thank you.
IFRS Training is your IFRS training partner in Africa. Annually, we offer courses in more than 15 cities in Africa and abroad, covering a wide range of topics such as IFRS, IPSAS, and GRAP. Over 5,000 professionals benefit from these programs. Our trainers have years of industry experience, offering quality training solutions that are at pace with the dynamic changes in the corporate world. Our mission is to be the leader in IFRS consultancy and training in Africa. Our vision is to build human capability and capacity through organizational development solutions. We currently offer training in the following cities in Africa and abroad: Johannesburg, Cape Town, Dubai, Lusaka, Maseru, Gaborone, Windhoek, Harare, Lilongwe, Dar es Salaam, Kigali, Nairobi, Kampala, Kinshasa, and Port Louis. Our popular courses include IFRS Masterclass, IFRS Refresher and Updates, IFRS 6 Exploration for and Evaluation of Mineral Resources, IFRS for the oil and gas petrochemical sector, IFRS for banks, and a wide range of offerings for GRAP and IPSAS. Let us partner with you on your training journey.